The Right-Handed Scar. Boom! Thunder roared like a pack of raging lions right outside the window of the rich man's house. Boom! 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 Multiple echoes sounded, as if the sky was having a battle of noise. All of the noise masked the sounds of the homeless man being beaten to death in the alley near the wealthy man's house. The homeless man was rather young, but he was a cast-out of society. His right hand was deformed and useless. The strange scar on it also had the misfortune of resembling a pagan symbol. No one would hire him. No one would associate with him. Their superstitions caused them to fear him. He was only 25 years of age, but his eyes bore the sorrow of his station. Yesterday, he had seen a woman about to be raped in an alley near where he usually slept. He stopped the attacker and knocked him unconscious with a blow to the head. The woman ran away in fear. But the attacker's friends heard what had happened, and they were now savagely beating the ragged young man. As the rain mixed with the blood on the cobblestone pavement, the three angry men rained kicks down on the poor man whose name was Will. They held no respect for his bravery. They did not notice that he never once cried out at their treatment. All their savagery broke his body, but not his spirit. But they were blind to it. Suddenly, in between the buildings close upon either side, a gentleman appeared. His cane held a golden head, and the tip was of silver. His overcoat's collar was raised to protect from the rain. His top hat was not terribly tall, a far cry from the ostentatious hats worn by most men of his station. His beard was well trimmed, but the features of his face were obscured by the darkness and heavy drizzle. Lightning flashed, but all that could be seen was a sharp nose and determined eyes. Will laid huddled in a fetal position, waiting for the punishment to continue. But his torturers were distracted by the sudden appearance of the well-dressed gentleman.
Seems I have come at the opportune time.
The man commented, his voice strong and deep, yet smooth and refined as a gentleman's voice ought to be. "Blimey, this bloke has got some crowns on him, fellas," one mentioned, eyeing the man who stood before them. The three rough men approached him. "Why don't you give us some dough for our trouble this night, Governor?"
Trouble? I should say so. You three seem to have been quite enjoying your little slugfest. Had a bit of whiskey, have we?
The man stayed in his spot, both hands resting on his cane. The rain did not appear to bother him in the least. "Why, Governor, we was just protecting you from the street scum. Mighty bad night out tonight. Wouldn't do to be mugged by a dangerous man like this, now would it?" the leader of the three stated, leering at the man. Will was still prone on the cobblestone, but he opened a bloody eye to see the exchange. The cloaked gentleman kept his voice calm.
As beating this man to death is against the law, I feel it necessary to inform you that an officer of said law is presently approaching. If you would care to glance down the street, you would see that I am correct.
The three ruffians refused to believe a word of it. "Why, you talk mighty fancy. Proper man like you on his big high horse. We ought to beat you too."
I strongly advise against it. However, if you press the matter, I shall be forced to call the officer's attention to this alley. I assure you, I am fully prepared to do so. Now leave, before I fulfill my threat.
He pointed down the street with his cane. All three looked at each other. None of them wanted to meet the police, especially after what they had done. But they hated the thought of being talked down by this wealthy, fancy-talking gentleman. But he had a presence that inspired fear. Something told them that challenging him would be disastrous. Finally, after a pause, their leader spoke up. "All right, we're going, but only 'cause of the bobbies. Don't go thinking you talked us down."
Off you go, then. Leave your victim to me.
Will's body was in shock. He saw his attackers disappear into darkness, but his vision began to fade. He saw the man bend over him, examining his badly injured body. But then his eyes closed, and Will fell into unconsciousness. A deep pit stretched out in infinite darkness. Will couldn't tell where it led or if it ever ended. All he knew was that he hated the feeling of falling with no end in sight. Objects fluttered by, bumping him. He couldn't see them, but they flew like bats, though much larger. The pit began to lighten, but only with a dull red glow. More objects fluttered past. He could hear their wings now. Or were those tiny shrieks? He continued falling, always falling. Gradually the red, burning light increased. Suddenly he could see far below him a huge red glow, as if a giant fire were burning down there. He stared. Suddenly, a hideous face formed in the fire, mouth open in a soundless growl or roar of anger and unbridled hatred. Will jerked upright in a large bed and immediately regretted it. His ribs screamed in protest and his muscles ached.
Easy, son. You need fear no dreams in this house.
Will laid back down, resting his head on the pillow, as he saw that the speaker was a middle-aged, well-dressed man with a short and well-trimmed beard. "Are you the man who saved me last night?" Will asked, examining the man's features. His graying hair was short and properly combed. His eyes were piercing but soft. He saw a touch of gentleness in them. His chin was strong and somewhat angular.
Yes, dear boy. Those men nearly succeeded in their task. You need much rest.
Will stared at the gentleman. "But, sir, who are you? Why would you rescue me?" He cracked a slight smile in reply.
You needed saving, so I saved you, as I would anybody. As for my name, that is easily answered. I am Cyrus West. And you?
Will blinked several times, fighting a headache and desperately trying to make sense of things. But, aren't you afraid of me?" Cyrus West actually chuckled at that.
Why ever would I be afraid of you, dear boy?
Will stumbled over his words. Because of my hand." Mr. West folded his hands on his cane. He wore white gloves on both hands.
Oh, you mean the deformity, don't you? No need to fear that. It's a naturally occurring phenomenon. And the mark, well, it's just a mark now, isn't it? Here now. You are tired and you need the time to heal. I've kept you awake too long.
He stood and patted Will's scarred right hand.
Don't you worry. You're safe here. Sleep well. Fear no evil dreams.
Will was indeed tired. His body was broken. He could feel bandages around his ribs. The beating had been severe. His eyes began to close, but through half-closed lids he saw the kind gentleman closing the door to his room with those white-gloved hands. Soon he fell asleep, and this time it was sweet and peaceful. The red fire could not enter here.
With credit to The Faceless Voice.